Hi, I'm Dr. Melissa Longo. Welcome to Everyday Rockstar Moms, where every episode I'll interview moms just like you who are rocking it in their homes, raising their children, managing their households, building their careers, working on their relationships, dealing with challenges, finding success, trying to find balance, and themselves along the way. Every episode you'll hear from women just like you of all ages and stages of motherhood, sharing their stories, life experiences, and leaving you with practical tips, ideas, and inspiration to help you rock your life. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Kim McNabb. Kim is a food worker working for a community action program for children in her community. She's an active volunteer, married to a great guy, and mother of 6 children ranging in age from 6 to 23 years. On this episode today, Kim talks about the challenges but incredible joys of a blended family and how together with her husband, they have created a wonderful home life for their children. She also discusses her story of escaping an abusive situation and how that difficult time, as hard as it was, impacted her current life in such a dramatic way, the kind of woman she is, the kind of mother that she is, but also allowed her to give back to the local women's shelter and profoundly impact so many other women's lives. Kim also talks about what prompted her to get married again, how she and her husband are able to find moments together in a house full of 6 kids, and how an indispensable group of female friends offers her support and fun on a daily basis. Kim's commitment to her family and making a difference in her community is admirable. I appreciated how real and open she was on today's interview. I thoroughly enjoyed this show. Check it out. Hi, Kim. Welcome to the show today.
Hello. Thank you.
I'm so glad that you're here. We've had such an interesting conversation already just in preparing for our discussion today. Perhaps you could start by just telling our listeners a little bit about who you are right now, where you are with your life and your family, and what's going on in your world.
All right. Wow, I hope we have time. So, well, I am a very proud mother of 6 kids, youngest being 6, oldest being 23. My 2 eldest are my stepchildren. And they don't live with me anymore, but my children nonetheless. I currently work for a community action program for children. I'm a food worker there. By volunteer life, I have spent the last 7 years on the board of directors for my friend's house, which is our local women's shelter, and 3 of which I chaired that board. And I'm also an active member of my church community, and now that my daughter is in grade 1, I'm looking forward to getting involved with her schooling a little bit. And I'm married to Tim McNabb, and a lot of you, he's kind of local celebrity on his own there. He manages Wendy's, and we've been married for 11 years.
Wow, just by quick listening to that, for most people, a family of 6 children is big by most of today's standards. So let's talk a little bit about what that has been like for you.
It's been definitely my biggest challenge because, of course, my family didn't start out big.
Right, you had three children before you met your husband, Tim.
Right.
Tim had 2.
Right.
And so you met each other, fell in love, and then blended your families, which is not an easy task.
It wasn't an easy task, no. It was the primary focus of our relationship for quite a while. So we were quite concerned about just, how the kids were going to get along. Honestly, we said to each other, no matter how much we love each other, if our kids don't adapt and can't get along, it's just not going to work. Which is a really difficult position to put most, single adults in, because you're looking to find companionship and love and support, and it's hard to find the right fit sometimes in a partner, and then to find that great fit and then potentially not have the kids get along or have other complications is awfully tragic sometimes. Well, one thing though, at the age that I was 37 when I met Tim, and at that point, my children had been my focus for a few years since my first marriage ended, and luckily we were on the same page with that. Tim's children were very important to him, and we were on the same page. And
I guess the age span would have been helpful. I mean, Tim's children were substantially older than your young children.
Yeah, they were. My kids, my oldest one, Connor, was 7 when I met Tim. I have had twin girls. Well, I have twin girls. They were 4. And then Tim's kids were entering the preteen and the teen years. So The age difference meant that, now luckily I'll just say that everything turned out wonderfully, obviously, because we've been married for 11 years. Now, James, the older one, he took to mentoring my son. The two of them, I can remember, I still have visions of them putting together little videos, playing outside, the sports and the scheming that boys do. And then Anna at the time was 9 and took to mothering my twins and, teaching them all the secrets about Barbies. And it was a really fun time, and it was very, very heartwarming to see them bond and to know that we were moving forward and this is actually going to work. Yeah.
So it sounds like they really connected easily as kids and individuals, but yet that was a really difficult time. Mm-hmm. You mentioned for you, what was the hardest part about blending your families?
Well, I think the hardest part was that decision and knowing that the kids needed to adjust. I had been living in Burlington at the time. I'd spent my whole life in the Mississauga, Burlington area. And I had only recently uprooted my children and moved to Collingwood. And I was very proud about that decision because I had decided I needed to move away from all that was familiar to start my life anew. I had decided I was never getting married again. I was never going down that path. Mm-hmm. So when I met Tim and we fell in love, it was a huge decision. I was very worried for my children and for Tim's children as well. So again, it was just that the hardest thing I've ever done was to say, okay, we're going to give this a try. We moved in a little less than a year before we actually got married, and just getting the house organized. I mean, there wasn't enough bedrooms. It was moving people around. It was creating this new habitat, this new way of existing for all of us. And it had to be comfortable. It had to be loving. It had to be accepting. The kids needed to be treated equally. If I made a dentist appointment for my children, I had to make sure that I was also paying attention to the dentist appointments for my stepchildren. And they needed to know that I cared for and loved and looked out for them as much as I did my own kids. And, that can be a challenge in the beginning.
Absolutely. Trying to find your place.
Right.
And I mean, certainly the children can make it difficult for new people in their lives.
Oh, they can. Absolutely. And honestly, everybody well-meaning giving advice from the outside as well. So, the children are always looking to make sure that everybody's being treated equally. Did you just give them a chocolate bar as a treat? Do you have 5 more of those in your purse? And also you've got the people on the outside saying, this is never going to work. There's no way this is going to work. You should never be, Tim should take care of his kids. You should take care of your kids. Don't be messing with their dentist appointments. And Tim and I, open communication made sure that we said, look, at the time I was a stay-at-home mom. And I said, I can't in my heart look after my children, go to the parent-teacher interviews. I keep going back to the dentist, but that's the example I use.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Make their dentist appointments and just ignore the other 2 and hope that, their mom does it or you remember to do it. Or, and I couldn't do it. I was the mom. I was the contact point at home for the school for when the kids walked through the door. And you know what? I wanted them to know that I was treating them the same way as I treated my kids. And for us, it worked. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Geez, there's so many questions I want to ask you now. But I mean, certainly, so many moms deal with challenges or comments and opinions from other people about the choices they're making for their family, whether it's what kind of food they're feeding them or the schools they're going to or how they're parenting them. And it sounds like you certainly had some of that grief, well-meaning sometimes, concerns from other people. How did you and Tim, or you as a woman, deal with that?
Tim taught me a lot, I have to say, in this particular point. I will not give him much credit anywhere else, but no, I was, as a young mom, when my first husband left, my children were very little. My twins were only 18 months old. Connor was 3. And for me, for some reason, I was now out to prove to the world that being a single mom of these 3 babies did not matter. Everything was going to look as though I could handle it on my own. And I spent a lot of time and energy making sure that the house was absolutely perfect. It did not look like the kids were suffering or that I was suffering. The kids were dressed perfectly, everything. And when it came to, fast forward a few years, married to Tim, add 2 more children to the mix, Tim taught me to sit back and first of all, not stress so much on the details. And I know we've all heard that one. But for me, it was big picture. So, maybe their breakfast wasn't the most nutritionally balanced breakfast, trying to get 6 kids dressed, fed, and out the door for school on time. But big picture, their lunches were packed the night before, so I knew they had good food in those. I was going to be serving them, nutritious snacks, and I'm using food just as an example, but big picture, I knew they were well fed and well taken care of, and I wasn't going to stress about, the sugar-coated cereal in the morning because that's all they would eat. So big picture was that was my mantra. Kept saying in my head, okay, big picture, Kim, big picture.
So when people gave you, grief, or they said this is never going to work with blended family, you were able to think about, oh, we're going to make this work. Big picture thinking.
I knew that it was one day at a time at that point, and my big picture was all of the necessities had been taken care of. Everybody was comfortable in the house. I mean, if you were to see my little house, people would always say, how do you fit 6 kids in that house? But I knew we had all their necessities taken care of. They knew that they could come to us with anything, and we didn't ever put them down for any complaints, because the kids would have complaints. They didn't like the way that something took place, or maybe they felt one of the other kids were being treated. So we always made sure that they were listened to and they felt listened to. So the outside, I didn't know a lot of people that were going through the same thing I was going through. So I really didn't give. Now, I will say my mother kind of walked into the house and looked at me and said, Kim, I really think it'd be easier for you to just move. And but she said to me later on, she said, I felt like I couldn't help you because I really didn't know what you were going through. So I didn't really look at a lot of advice as far as blending a family that large.
It sounds to me like you and Tim really had a focus on what you wanted to create together.
We did.
And you put the children first and really focused on the kind of family life that you wanted to have, and that has to be part of why you created it, why it worked out so well. Well,
we had a vision. And like I've mentioned before, I was the mom at home, and people would say to me, like, how are you doing this? Like, how are you doing this? They would say, after school in our house is crazy. There's backpacks everywhere. There's lunch kits everywhere. The kids are tired, trying to get dinner. How are you doing this with 6 kids? And we had systems in place, and I used to say it's kind of like I'm a military mom or something sometimes. But we had rules, and I wasn't afraid to enforce them. We had rules, and there was ways of doing things. So the after-school routine, you come in the house, you empty your lunch kit, you hang up your backpack, and you put things where they belong, and it worked. I mean, they
kept some order to the house.
Kept order, and the kids knew what was expected of them. And if they didn't, then there was always a consequence. They're talking to, or whatever that was. So Tim backed me up, and that's very important too, because if I went to him and said, okay, James refused to empty his kit and his lunch kit and hang up, then I knew I could rely on him to make sure that, he talked to James or whatever it was. And then, Tim knew that he could count on me. So you
felt supported by your partner.
Supported, good word. Exactly. Yeah. That was very important. So I would, at this point in our lives, we really weren't looking for advice from anybody. We were just looking to try, and we're looking at ourselves, seeing how this worked. And a lot of it was fly by the seat of our pants. I mean, honestly, honestly.
It's just one day at a time, though. I mean, I say that to so many of the moms in the practice, where they're struggling with one thing one day, or one child is sick, or they don't know how they're going to manage when their partner goes out of town. I'm like, just one day at a time, one meal at a time. Sometimes just, go slowly and don't try to push yourself to accomplish things that are maybe too much for you to take on right now.
Right.
So it sounds to me like during those years, your primary focus was within the home.
Absolutely.
You weren't pursuing a career outside the home at that time.
I wasn't. No.
How did you feel about that?
I had with my first husband, I went to University of Toronto, and I have degrees, teaching degrees, and we decided when we got married, way back then, we got married in 91. That if we had kids, I had decided then I did not want to raise someone else to raise my children. That's my personal decision, and so we waited to have children, and I had decided, like I said, I was staying at home, and I absolutely loved it. Were there times that I thought to myself, oh my goodness, that amount of time in university, and I've wasted it to change diapers? Absolutely, but. No, I've honestly, big picture, I've never regretted it. And I knew the day would come that I would go back to work. But, and then especially when I ended up getting a divorce, moving to a new community, I was so thankful that I was still able to stay at home, support all those changes, be there for the kids. And so it really worked well for me. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, bring in 2 more kids. It was perfect. I've always found, even to this day, the first half hour after they come in the door after school, that's when you're going to hear it all. The good, the bad, the ugly. And give them too much time to settle in and go and get on their phones or the TV or whatever it might be. Those things that you don't hear about them.
You miss something.
You miss things, yeah. But I loved it.
So let's talk a little bit about this magic man, Tim. I mean, you said you were never going to get married again.
No.
And what changed that? Besides, obviously meeting someone who you really connect with.
He was persistent. I think it was more the age that I was at 37. I was able to sit down with this man and say, these are my red flags in a relationship. This is what I accept, and this is what I won't accept, and I'm too old to change. So if I'm quite a feminist. Everyone that knows me knows that. So if I'm just going to throw this as an example. So if you like to go to strip clubs and whatever this is not going to work. If that's if watching movies that put women down or anything, if this is something that you don't want to leave your life or you can't do without, then this is not going to work right now. No matter how much I love you, no matter how much you want to try this, was an example to him of one of my red flags. Mm-hmm. This is how I mold my life. This is the example I want for my children. Not willing to compromise. And so then he would say to me, these are the things in my life that I'm not willing to compromise on. Can you do it? And honestly, I ended up with somebody that really seemed to fit my, I want to say ideal of if I'm going to partner with someone for the rest of my life. Somebody that's going to be there for me and makes me feel special and fathers my children as if they're his own. That was huge, and it fit.
So how do you make time for each other as a couple when you have 6 kids?
Well, I mean,
or how did you at the different stages? I'm sure now the 2 oldest are out of the house, and they're different ages now. But at the beginning, you're in this new lovey-dovey relationship, and you're also blending your families.
Well, and again, it's like, I think I keep going back to how old I was, but I think our ages at the time, really, we were mature enough to say, hey, right now at this point in our life, this is what private time is going to look like. In a couple of years, it's going to look different, and you're willing to kind of, maybe he'd say to me, let's go check out the garden. And we're just in the backyard, but we're holding hands, walking through the garden with our evening coffee in our hands. and we might be able to steal 20 minutes, half an hour before somebody comes in. So it looks different. It looks different at the different stages. Now, we had pretty much right from the beginning built-in babysitters. And that was quite lucky, although we wanted to be careful not to take advantage of them, right? Because they don't want them to resent it. But, you know, the older kids did get to the age where we would say that coffee in the backyard turned into, Daddy and I just want to go out for half an hour for a coffee. So we could get in the car and go to a coffee house or something. And so
you found the time where you could, basically.
You eke it out.
Yeah.
And you do have to make it a priority. It would be really easy not to bother, but we really had to make it a priority. We were a big one for our walks. People still say to us, we see you and Tim walking all over the place. And again, it doesn't have to be an hour walk. It's just
some time to connect.
Exactly.
Because oftentimes we can get so busy with the tasks of running a household, managing the meals and taking care of things, that you're not really connecting and having a face-to-face conversation that you feel engaged with the other person. You're just dealing with the busyness of life.
Absolutely. No, and we were a big one for reconnecting because we had to exchange that information. So that was a big priority for us.
Are there any rituals that you have? You've talked about, some certain key things being part of your family life, especially when the kids were younger, and maintaining order. Do you and Tim have any rituals? Like, you talk about your evening coffee, but do you have any other rituals that keep you guys connected? Do you talk throughout the day? Do you have date nights? Do you have any special things? I mean, if you're obviously comfortable sharing, but...
No, absolutely. I mean, communication between the two of us has always been huge. And we're big advocates for that. Talk about anything. I don't care if it's, a new way that you're wearing. If you notice you're wearing your hair differently, mention it. The little things, I'll say to him, gee, I spent half my day cleaning the bathrooms. Did you notice? And I needed to feel validated at home, just because I wasn't working. But I can't expect him to be a mind reader, and I never have been able to, so I would say to him, jokingly, oh yeah, did you notice I cleaned the bathrooms? But it was a very serious comment because I needed that validation for the everyday work that I did. I mean, my day started very early and I flopped into bed at night, and in between there, it was kids and house. And if I didn't have some kind of, good for you, we all need that, right?
Absolutely.
We all need that.
And that's, as you and I were chatting about before we started the recording today, so many times moms don't feel that at all. And that's the whole purpose of this podcast, is to remind moms, if you're listening to this and you've got young children and a career and a family, or you're on your own and you're looking after your house, like, you're a rock star, because it's a hard job.
You're juggling a lot of balls.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in those days, I mean, you said, you have a teaching degree. You didn't regret giving up your career, but there had to have been days where you're thinking, okay, I'm starting my day early. I'm in the house. I'm looking after kids. At the end of the day, I'm flopping into bed. Is this what you signed up for?
Well, I left out a huge detail. I left out a bit of a detail. So I mentioned my first marriage ended, quite shockingly to me, and left me in quite a state, a reeling state, a bit of depression. And it was about a couple of years after that I ended up in a very abusive relationship. And I want to mention this because it's ended up shaping my life in a very positive way. It was a shock to me. It was actually my pharmacist. So that's a point I want to throw out there too. I mean, abusers are come in all shapes and sizes and socioeconomic levels. So, it was a very, very rough time for me, trying to, first of all, I was well educated. I was a smart woman. How did I end up in this cycle of abuse? When I finally was able to break free a couple of years later, that was one of my motivations for moving to Collingwood. And there's a huge healing process that goes on for that, and I'm still going through it years and years later. You never really totally heal from it. And Tim was extremely understanding of that. That was one of the things that I had to lay out to him in the beginning is, hey, I'm an abuse survivor. I've actually been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder because of it. And so why enter into all this chaos with all these kids? It was something of a healing process for me, something positive to focus on. And I was actually able to say to myself, okay, I need to know that I've come this far, gone through all of this. There's a reason. And I am also very spiritual. I believe that, God has focused me in this direction. I didn't go through all this bad for no reason. I'm going to keep my mind and my heart open for where I'm directed next. And for me, it was in the direction of helping my friend's house. So although I didn't have a paid career at the time when I came to Collingwood, I ended up involved in the community and with the shelter in a way that was really healing for me. And also I think a way that was quite a good example for my kids there to watch me go through this.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you so much for sharing that. I have no doubt that women listening to this know of women who have gone through something similar. And I'm sure you're seeing that all the time with your work at my friend's house. I mean, it's still a shock to most women that, and men that this kind of, there's still a need in most of our communities.
Oh yeah. I mean, Collingwood's a moderate sized community now. I don't know whether we can say it's small anymore.
No.
No. But we're still servicing between phone calls and women in the beds in the shelter, 1,600 women a year. It's something that still goes on. Like I said, you never quite know. It used to carry that stigma of that it's low income, uneducated, keep it in your own house, it's nobody's business. But I think that has been one of my goals, being on my friend's house the past 7 years, is to just educate people and get it out there that it's anybody, anywhere, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. So if I've been able to do that at all, then I feel successful.
It sounds like very, very purposeful for you, coming to Collingwood, but also, using your new family, the children, to ground you, to help you heal, to give you something on your own journey as a woman to move forward and then be able to give back so much to the community.
I'll tell you, it wasn't about, I would say, 3 years ago. My son is going to be 19. So he was about 16 years old, and he said to me, Mom, he came up to me one day, he said, Mom, how old do I have to be? And I thought, to be for what? I thought he was going to say to get my license or whatever. And he said, to sit on the board of my friend's house.
Wow.
And I still get goosebumps when I say it. And I think, every mom knows that the kids are always watching and listening, right? And part of you is thinking, they're always listening when you slip up and swear, or when you're eating the bag of chips, or they're watching the good stuff. They're watching the good stuff too. And that just solidified it for me. They're watching this and they know, and they're learning along with me, and they've always voluntarily been involved with all the fundraising and stuff. And, and they will teach their friends. My 2 daughters, they're going to be some roaring feminists, I can tell you. So
you're creating motherhood and fatherhood. I mean, we're creating people, right? We're giving these children the opportunities to grow and thrive in every possible way, and not just providing them food and meals, but helping them navigate their emotional landscape and how to deal with situations and confront challenges. So it's a big job. It is a big job.
The one thing that I'm a big fan of as well is age appropriate, and that's a term that I use because information that I've given my children about my divorce, about my abuse, about my plans has always I've never made up stories, I've never lied to them, but I've always made sure that what I tell them is age appropriate. They didn't need to know about the abuse right away. When they got old enough to be able to understand it and to be able to work it through, that's when I release information. So I don't know, I feel like sometimes we're living in an age where the kids can get a hold of so many different movies and information at their fingertips, but when it comes to their parents and people that they're looking up to and role modeling from, I think you have to be honest with them. You have to always tell them the truth. But I am a big fan of being age appropriate when they're ready to digest it and when they're ready to be able to make sense of it.
Mm-hmm. That's good
and that's
advice.
really worked for me. Yeah.
Who have been, I mean, it sounds to me like that whole experience you just shared was a very pivotal experience for you. It shaped who you are as a woman and really solidified who you want to be as a woman.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Who would you say would be some of the most influential women in your life that have helped you either along that path or influenced you as a mother?
Well, it's funny, when you had provided me with like some thoughts, coming into this program, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, let's come up with some really impressive names here. But the one that keep popping into my head was honestly it's my aunt. She's my dad's sister. She is one of these moms that I always wished I could be. Like, I watched her. She had 4 children. Her house was, well, she had up, let's just say, she had up one of those signs that say, the housework can wait because the children are only small for a short time. Do you know those signs?
Yeah.
Well, she took that to heart. Let's just say that. And nothing ever seemed to faze her. And she rolled with the punches. She's ended up raising 4 dynamically different individuals. She's always been a faithful woman. She's always been in her community, making a difference. Thanksgiving dinners, there was always some scruffy stranger at the table that she had literally pulled in off the street because they didn't have anywhere to go. She would bring in youth that were homeless and didn't have anywhere to go. These kids, some were great. She still keeps in contact with them. Some of them, one of them blew up her car once. I mean, we're talking, but it never stopped her. That's fine. Mm-hmm. Next. And I always admired that. Now, I don't think I could thrive in that kind of chaos, honestly, personally.
Yeah.
But it always brings me back. Like, when I feel like I can't handle any more stress, she's a phone call away. And it's just a whole opposite perspective. And, I just always, she's kind of like, oh, I wish I could be more like that. But she's always there for good advice. And
sometimes the people that are most unlike us are the biggest teachers.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I've said that to some of the moms that I know have listened to the show because, certainly all the guests I've had on have different personalities and life experiences and different, communication styles. And some listeners, resonate with some of the guests more than others. And I said, you know what, you just got to be open to everyone. Everyone has a great story. And oftentimes the things that we don't want to hear are the ones that we absolutely need to hear.
Absolutely.
So that's an interesting dynamic between you and your Aunt Linda.
Yeah. No, and she lives on a farm. I'm anybody that knows me, like I said, with the kids come in or the backpacks get put away,